Awesome. Okay, so to get us started, tell me how you got started with Study Abroad Day.
Yeah. So when I started this whole thing, I will say it kind of like a lot of things just came out of kind of a rogue conversation. At the time, this was, gosh, probably 6 years ago now, I was working in a small to mid private liberal arts college. I was mostly a one person office the time that I worked there in study abroad. And I think one of the things that I really enjoyed, one of the best parts of the job was reentry, right? Like actually getting the opportunity to talk to students about their experience and what was important for them, what was impactful. And that was something that I really looked forward to every time I got the opportunity to kind of engage with that. And I felt like our campus was really and our field honestly was missing a lot of that storytelling and a lot of that kind of nitty gritty what this is about because everything winds up being, I think, just really fluffy and Instagram, like everything's pretty and everything's a great day. And I look at all these places I'm traveling to because nobody posts on Instagram the day they're homesick and they're crying in their apartment or like the day that they went to class and they have no idea what the instructor said for an hour and a half or the day that they went to a restaurant and thought they ordered one thing really well and it came back and was not the food they thought they were right. Like all those kinds of things are not the things that typically make it into, what we're talking about with what study abroad is. And I think kind of our at the time our kind of main time to really kind of dive more into international is International Education Week. And I will be the first to say that I love International Education Week. I think it's a really nice opportunity to, think about international as a whole on campus. I think that our international student services, maybe had a good time in their year to kind of call some attention and do some programming. But for me in education abroad, it really wasn't a good time. November is not a time that I have a lot of extra energy to do programming because I'm just trying to do orientations and get people ready to go and make sure they're doing their visa applications. And, I don't have a choice to not do those things. So those are always going to take priority. And so I was in, I think it was actually a Generation Study Abroad call. So there was an initiative a while ago that IAE had started where they were like, let's increase study abroad participation by 50% over the next, I don't remember how many years it was, 5 or 10 or something. It was a wild, wild aspiration that we were signed on to. And I was experiencing some institutional challenges and just kind of like, I don't really know how I'm supposed to achieve this with, no increase in resources or staff or anything to make this happen. And I'm also feeling like we're so focused on process and sure we're doing recruitment, but we're not giving any more meaning to what we're doing. And so a colleague of mine was also on that call, and at one point we kind of just started this derail side conversation and kind of took over and started talking about, wouldn't it be great if there was just a day, just a manageable chunk of time, in a time that works better for us, where we could just call attention and however it works, it works. And so we did it. We met with some folks, we did some chats at NAFSA and some other places and just said, hey, you know what? Let's give it a shot. If the two of us on our respective campuses have a great time, that'll be a success. That's fine. And I will say we were very, very fortunate because our first celebration was February 2020. So had we done it even a little bit later, it might not exist. But we had just a shocking level of participation, even in year one, right? Like the amount of people that posted and were doing things on their campus. Like I remember just being in shock. Like, oh, other people thought this might be cool too. This is great. Um, and so now we're in year 5 already. So yeah.
Awesome. So that's actually a good segue into my follow-up question. How has Study Abroad Day grown in the past 5 years?
Oh my gosh. So, I mean, I think I think we've just seen more and more people getting excited about it. We've definitely seen some bigger partnerships coming through. So I want to say it was like year three, maybe. We were approached by VOTRM about how they could support us, and I made kind of an offhanded comment because I was like, well, I mean, I built this website in Google Sites and it's sad and like it looks like I made a MySpace page for Study Abroad Day, right? Like, I mean, it's fine, it's here, but it'd be really cool if we had a more professional looking website. And they said, yep, we're going to build it for you. And they went through that whole process. In fact, they're the ones that wrote, we have a blog, and they actually did the first blog post for us, kind of about how Study Abroad got started, Study Abroad Day got started, and those kinds of things. And we're really lucky that they've kept being involved with us, and they helped us partner with a t-shirt vendor to get some cool t-shirts going. They put together for this year, we have some exciting new things. They made us a coloring book, so that's in our toolkit, because who doesn't love coloring? So that's an easy thing for people to use. And we're getting a lot more attention. I think last week NAFSA put out an article, which was kind of like mind blowing. I'm like, oh my gosh, it must be real because NAFSA said it's real. So I think it's just it's getting to that point where people are like, oh, okay, this is a real thing. It's not going anywhere. We're gonna keep doing it. And so I think we're seeing more and more energy behind it, and more people kind of, taking creative control over how a celebration might work for them.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then also, again, like a very natural segue, how do you think providers can support Study Abroad Day, or what do you think? What are some things that you've seen providers do to help like promote it or celebrate it?
Yeah, so I think one thing that I say to everybody that asks me how to celebrate it is that it's none of my business to tell you how to celebrate it, right? Like I think there was a very clear intention behind creating something that people could take and make their own, right? I don't want to just put another thing on all of our to-do list that says we have to do this and we have to do it in this way. No, we are holding space, right? It is space for people to, kind of focus on that celebration piece. Some people like to have a study abroad fair. Some people like to do specific events. I think I've seen some campuses do like an international game night or an international food themed event. Like there's so many different ways that people can kind of do what works best for them. I think for providers or really any organization, my question is usually who do you serve? Who is kind of your regular target audience that you're reaching or you're working with? And how can you make this a day that, maybe you do something a little bit different from what you normally do, or maybe you're looking at, some of your core partners and are they celebrating? Maybe they are. Maybe you could lend some support to what they're doing. Maybe someone goes and brings them some swag to raffle off, or, maybe they're having a cool event, or, maybe you could help them put a celebration together because maybe they're a small office and they're struggling to figure out how to do that. There's one of the pages on our site is just a catalog of just all kinds of ideas that some of them we came up with, but a lot of them other people submitted to us of, hey, here's what we're doing. And we add it to the list in case that might be something somebody else wants to take and adapt and use on their campus.
Yeah, for sure. So that almost wraps up my questions, but I do want to touch on something that you mentioned earlier, kind of with like the Instagramification of study abroad, and just kind of how you talked about how like you don't stay on Instagram like the day you're homesick, or like, the day you ordered a cappuccino with Thai food. Not that I ever did that, or yeah. So I was just kind of wondering how you think like Study Abroad Day kind of helps celebrates like study abroad as like a whole picture instead of just like the Instagrammable parts.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, in some ways, I remember the very first Study Abroad Day, I I did my own post. So I try, this is silly. This is just me. But I try to have themes each year because I'm like, wow, I have to post each year and I have to find something new to say. But I think even just as a human who has studied abroad and, you know, especially for our recent returned students, everybody's over it already, right? Like, you know, they'll ask them very high level, how was your time? And they just want to hear it was great and move on and talk about what's for lunch, right? Like it's really a bummer. And so, you know, if nothing else, it is a time for people who have done this to kind of command and say, I'm going to demand attention about my experience and why it was important to me. And kind of gives them that permission and that excuse to post some photos or share a story or talk about it. I think at the time I was on a campus and it gave faculty a time to talk about it in class, and students might have been like, "Oh, I didn't know that you studied abroad," and they're like, "I did. Let me tell you about it." And so I think it holds that space. But there's an extent to which that's still kind of on the individual and the organization to kind of be intentional with that. So, you know, I think last year my post, I think I did a photo from, I don't remember where the photo was, but I've started to think about kind of the larger impact that, you know, I didn't know in 2008 when I studied abroad that I would be doing this as my life, right? Like, I had no idea. And so, you know, just thinking about that as a launching point, in terms of, you know, posting something memorable and meaningful for my own experience, but I've now gotten into thinking about what this career has meant for me, right? So, the blessing of getting to work with students and getting to, you know, help them with things that are hard and things that are going to challenge them, and being brave enough to be honest about that and to say, you know, this is going to be hard and it's supposed to be, right? You're choosing an immersive experience. You're not choosing a vacation, right? This is going to be different and you're not going to like it sometimes, and it's okay. And it's okay to not like it, and it's okay to sit with that for a little bit. Like don't just drown without telling anybody. Like, you know, like think about the experiences that, while maybe uncomfortable and maybe there was an actual problem, but going through working through that and going through asking for help and going through letting somebody know, hey, I'm having this problem, so that they could help you. Those are experiences that are so important later, because you're going to have experiences where you have to ask people for help. You're going to have experiences that are hard. You're going to have experiences that are impossibly hard as an adult, right? And so that's kind of your intro to that. And so, you know, again, I think some of this is really kind of on the folks that are putting things together for themselves, of like, okay, do we want to do a fluffy event, or, you know, how do we kind of put some of that in there? Are we encouraging students to post with a particular topic, or are we encouraging them to maybe share a little bit deeper? Some places like to do some reentry things specifically on Study Abroad Day, so that they can, you know, maybe have some of that kind of content and that kind of discussion, as opposed to just straight recruitment. But, you know, I think it's something that I try to kind of lead by example with, just, you know, in terms of what I'm posting and what I'm putting out there and what I'm encouraging. But, you know, if at the end of the day a Study Abroad fair is what works best for somebody, cool. Like, you know, I'm not here to tell you how to do it. You know, but maybe just supporting, you know, professionals that are already taxed out and burned out, and making their lives a little bit easier, you know, that's a great way to impact the field and impact people that are trying to do these kinds of things, because they might have more ability to do that because they had somebody supporting them.
And then one last question, also kind of based off of what you said. What would you say to students who are like hesitant to study abroad, or who might be kind of afraid of some of the messier aspects?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I think I think I'm always very cautious with that conversation, right? Because, you know, while they don't feel like it, students are adults. They are grown adults. So, I always kind of, I think as an advisor, I adopt a very halfway approach of like, you have to feel some level of confidence in saying yes, right? And as soon as you say, I think yes, I'm going to do everything that I can to help you. I'm going to do everything that I can to prepare you, right? And part of preparing you says that I can't prepare you for everything. I can't come up with every single thing you might experience and how you as an individual might experience it, right? Because everybody's completely different. And so I think it's really just kind of an empowerment approach of like, you can do this. If you don't feel ready, then that's okay, right? And maybe we revisit this next semester or next year, or when you do feel like maybe you're a little bit more ready, or, maybe it's thinking more critically about what kind of program they're looking at, right? Like, a super independent direct exchange is not going to work for everybody, but maybe that student says, okay, maybe a shorter faculty-led program is a good place to start, or heck, maybe a domestic program is a good place to start because it's something and it maybe feels a little bit less intimidating. And you can then kind of use that as a launch point to say, okay, I did this successfully, so maybe that means I can do something more. Um, and so I think it's honestly a lot of just kind of listening to students and letting them know they absolutely can. They can do things, right? Maybe they can't do the specific thing that they really wanted to because maybe we don't have a program in that specific place, or whatever, but there are things that are out there that are going to work for them, and when they're ready to do it, we're just here to help, right? So, I think for me, I kind of got the sense that study abroad advisors become kind of the closers, right? I don't think that we're typically the most effective first voice, right? They need some of those folks that I think they tend to, especially early career, rely on a lot. So that's their academic advisors, that's their faculty, that's their peers, right? If the people around them aren't telling them that this is a good idea and they can do it, guess what? That's not going to work. And so, some of it is that network building, and getting folks kind of on board to champion what you're doing and getting them to believe in it. And guess what? If you have a day where they get to like talk about their own stuff, they're maybe more inclined to do that. But again, I think just kind of holding that genuine space to kind of let them lead a little bit.
Yeah, cool. And I think study abroad day is like the ideal place for that, especially like amongst like peers, and like letting students share about their experiences, and then other students who haven't gone abroad yet can hear that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, I think that's all my questions.
Okay. Great.